Well, we're turning our attention now to another controversy which made the rounds over the weekend, which is about this settlers' RUGA settlement controversy. This is just a, well, we've been told it's just another word for settlement, that's RUGA. We're now being joined by Professor Rufai Alkali, who is a former National Publicity Secretary of the PDP, a former Pro-Chancellor and Chairman of Council of FUT Mina for 2 terms, and also a former Commissioner of Agriculture and Water Resources in Gombe State, where he also served as Chairman State Committee for Conflict Resolution between herdsmen and farmers. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily, Prof.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Well, you have seen this controversy coming before now. You sat on this committee for conflict resolution between herdsmen and farmers between 1997 to 1998. Is that right?
That's right.
So it means that the problem has been on for quite a while.
Absolutely, absolutely.
What were the solutions you proffered then, and how different are they from what we're seeing now?
Well, first and foremost, I want to state this, that I have been avoiding going into this debate on the issue of farmers and herdsmen in Nigeria for the simple reason that initially it was a simple debate on the direction of the Nigerian economy, how various forces could operate and work together for the development of our country. But gradually, we noticed that there is a lot of sentiments, a lot of emotions, and everything was highly politicized. Now, we are, of course, in the environment of politics, and once issues are highly politicized and things are changed, are very charged, people begin to forget the basics. So for this reason, mainly, for a long time, I avoided going into this debate. But the other reason why I can say that one can add 1 or 2 things on this matter for now is that the issue is pestering and assuming even more serious dimensions, challenging our security in this country. So, but like we really observed, that this problem is not new, but it becomes more complex continuously over a long period of time. Way back when Gombe State was created in 1996, just about 10 months later, the military administrator then, Guru Katinja, appointed us as commissioners, and I was posted to the Ministry of Agriculture and Water Resources, now made of about 4 or 5 ministries. And one of the things we faced at that time was the issue of these herdsmen and farmers. And we were appointed in September, but 22nd of September, 1997. So, but in the few months that we started working, this issue started rearing its head. So that was the time when they appointed me as the chairman of the committee to deal with these farmers and herdsmen. And the committee was made up of people from various backgrounds, including the director of land, including officers from the ministry, including chairman of the farmers association, the chairman of the herdsmen or cattle rearers, some traditional rulers, everybody who matters, and the security police, and we went around and looked at the issues, examined the issue, and we realized it was a very complex situation. But
what did you find?
Why that time it was critical was that we found that in the months of October, November, just before the end of the year, that was fairly made than just 2 months after we took over office, was that the main issue that attracted government at that time was there was mass movement of what we call Udawas from outside the country, which is a traditional movement actually every year. But because Gombe is surrounded by River Gongola, so you have to cross River Gongola to come into Gombe State, anyhow. So, and the entry points for Gombe at that time were either through the Nafada axis or through Dadinko axis, but the commonest one was through the Dadinko axis. So it was a big problem because if you look at October, November, for this part of the country, in this northern part of the country, most farmers would not have cleared their farm produce. And that in the process, when they begin to come, they come in large numbers. And some of them, of course, invade some lands, even graze over people's, farms. And that caused a lot of havoc. It was tense. So the government had to come up with options, and we look around and came up with so many suggestions. But apart from those Udawas who are coming from outside, we also had the local farmers and cattle rearers, because they are also, they are more or less like two sides of the same coin. Traditionally, farmers and cattle rearers are two sides of the same coin. They cohabitate, they live together, they associate. But occasionally, of course, we have this conflict because, one, the tendency for cattle rearer to go into somebody's farm is just inevitable, it's just common. So, and of course, no farmer will allow that to happen. No farmer, after harvesting, or after, running your farm for about 6 months during rainy season, and in one day somebody goes into it. But at that time, the traditional way of solving the problem was either through the courts or through the community leaders. And where there is damage, it is easy at that time to say, okay, you can either at the community level or through the Alkali system, you can, ask the person to pay fines, and then it is resolved that way, and then they also warn not to repeat those kind of things. But the kind of Udawa that were coming, they were coming with different weight, different power, with most of them coming, with many cattle, and then by I think 1998, it was so intense, and then gradually some people began to feel that they were not safe anymore. So government had to come up with security measures of how to maybe contain them as they were coming into the state. Because remember, apart from the local routes, there are also international routes. So they're not only coming to graze into Gombe, but they're also going to move through Gombe and across the state down to the southern part of the country. But what we also noticed in that particular period was a new phenomena emerged. And I think it spilled over up to maybe year 2000 or a little more, because after we handed over this problem of pestering, a new group emerged that they are not Udawas, they are not the local cattle rearers, but they are really cattle rustlers. And they didn't care whether you are a farmer, whether you are a cattle rearer, whether you are Fulani man, whether you are Hausama, whether you are Muslim, whether you are Christian. They will just go and go into the territory and then corner the people. In fact, we will force women at that time to cook for them. After eating, they will now carry some of the cows and go and dispose them. It started happening and became a very big problem. It took time before the security agency government really came in, and then it subsided.
So the solution then was deploying security agencies to ensure that, the farmers' farms were protected. That's what I'm getting out of what
yeah, you're right. In the case of the local...
In terms of the Udawas who were coming in from outside the country.
Yes.
But in case of the local farmers and local herders,
yes,
what was the solution?
The solution was always to bring the leaders of the various professions, let me put it that way, all the farmers and the cattle rearers together, because one is, the assumption is that every cattle rearer is a Fulani man, and every farmer is a non-Fulani man, and that's not true, because there are cattle rearers who are cattle owners who are not Fulani. They may use a Fulani man or Fulani people to run their cattle, but they may not necessarily be Fulani people, many of them. And there are farmers who are also Fulanis. So because sedentary Fulanis sometimes combine both arable farming and then cattle rearing. So for them, it is, you may have a small herd of maybe 30, 40, 50, and they will roam around and the rest of it. Like I said, whenever there's problem, it is sorted out through the community and through the local courts. So one of the areas we found also at that time was that sometime after the harvest, some maybe owners of the cattle will say, okay, please, we need the conch stocks in your farms. Can you sell that to us? So that we can now put our cattle there for grazing. We find in some communities somewhere where after the cattle owners have purchased the corn stock in those farms, then sometimes some young boys will just go and burn the whole places. And then therefore, those cattle rearers will feel that they have lost money, and then they'll have to find other sources. And it used to raise tensions. There are so many small things that used to come up at that time. But like I said, there are three elements. One, the local cattle rearers who are sedentary, who are both farmers and then cattle rearers. And usually they are small herds, maximum maybe 100 plus or so. So, but then the Udawas who come, their own cattle are different, usually reddish, big horns. They also come with a number of rams, usually red and white, red and white. They are unique. And they come with their wives, their children, sometimes on donkeys, and they move. But because the way and manner they come, and sometimes the complaint is that the traditional cattle routes, we are not talking even about the local cattle routes, the international ones are getting narrower and narrower over a period of time because of more cultivation, more people going into farms, and then sometimes a lack of control over the grazing reserves. You say not only grazing reserve, the cattle routes, and then even water points for the cattle. And all these are trouble spots.
Well, right now, the federal government has come up with this solution because it has gone on for quite a while now. It's caused a lot of problem, particularly in the Middle Belt states. And some people will say it's no surprise. They happen also to be very fertile, and that's why you also have a lot of the rivers which course through the country. You have a lot of them situated there in that region. So do you think that this solution now will work, especially when you look at the controversy that has sprang up as a result of it? The federal government is saying let them have settlements where they can stay. There are questions as to who is staying. Is it the local Fulani people? Is it the Udawa, which you mentioned, who will come in every year? There are questions, there are huge questions, but what are your thoughts on the solutions being provided?
Now let us look at it this way. You see, it like it's almost moving like in phases. That first wave, if I want to call it as a wave, was over 21, 22 years ago we are talking about. It was mainly in the northeast at that time. Maybe it's been happening in other parts of the northern states, but it was more common at that time from the northeast. But you could see that a few years back, it started moving into the Midlands. You're talking about Kaduna, you're talking about Nasara, you're talking about Benue, you're talking about Plateau. It was also another wave. And now, more recently, the wave have now moved to northwest, first starting from Zamfara. And the issue of Zamfara, before I come to that answer to that question, in the case of Zamfara, some of our colleagues in ABU Zaria have done extensive study of what was happening in Zamfara, and they even presented reports of their researches. And it was pathetic because initially, what started was a cattle rustling. People would go and pick cows and go and sell because the cattle became like the easiest currency in the economy. Because when you pick them, you take 1 ton or 2 ton. It's not like stealing a cow where you have to go and look for how do you dispose it of. It can be disposed easily. It just became the easiest currency by anybody at that time. That was the first phase. But I think at that time people were taking it for granted. But people always get sophisticated. Even in crime, people get sophisticated by the day. I think it reached a point where some of them felt that what the hell, I'm sorry to use that language, that should they bother about taking cows from one place to another to go and sell? Especially because occasionally they find resistance from the local community. Then next, they move to the stage of capturing the head of the family, or the wife, or the children, or a combination, and then this is what called adoption or kidnapping. And then they tell the other boys, go and sell the cows, we want so much amount of money, and bring it, cash, otherwise your father will be killed, or your mother. So this was the next phase. So, of course, in Zamfara at that time, the vigilantes were very active, they are very strong, but it reached a point also there was deep fight between the vigilante groups and then the cattle rustlers. So it's the kind of thing you read in movies in the US when they talk about cowboys invading territories. That was how it is. So, but whether those people who are involved were local elements or combined with outside elements, one will not say, because the security agencies are well trained to know most of these things. Now, so in that case, it means that in the case of Zamfara now, after a while, people are even talking about, no. It's no more about the cattle, about gold research, gold search, and the rest of it. It became more complicated and messy. So they have now started moving down to other communities, other states in Katsina, Sokoto, even Kebbi, even Jigawa. So nowhere is left behind. So it means that we have to look at the picture in totality. Yes. Unless you understand the forces behind it, you'll not be able to understand how to go about it.
So, but, I mean, so far so good.
Yes.
We know that there's a lot of conversation happening at the federal level. Do you think, from what you know and from what you have seen your colleagues research, do you think this RUGA solution will work?
You see, no matter what happens, the federal government has a responsibility to deal with this critical matter. I think what is happening is that however serious a matter is, especially in a political environment, people have sense of fear, of uncertainty, or what is the motive behind a particular idea. So if a community does not understand the motive, clear motive of why something is done, there will be resistance. So I suspect that the federal government, with this very sense of now urgency, thinking of how to address this matter, will have to engage communities and states. It is very, very important. Once we engage them and they understand the issues, then there must be a solution to it. Because, my sister, let me tell you this. Oil in Nigeria would not have been useful unless there was investment in oil. If the oil was not invested in for all these years, today we will not be driving anything from it as we are celebrating today. So certainly if you don't invest in agriculture, you don't invest in education, you don't invest in mineral resources, you don't invest, then forget it, you cannot reap anything from a benefit from it. So, and the issue of livestock is an integral part of agriculture. In fact, one of our own worry and our concern all this time has been that the issue of agriculture, at least at the federal level, is that always seen as only a question of arable farming. Other elements, like livestock, like forestry, like fisheries, are taken as subsidiaries or supplemental to agriculture. So if you don't invest, if you invest in arable farming, and you protect the arable farming, and you don't protect the fisherman, and you don't protect the forestry, you don't protect the herdsman. I don't want to use the herdsman. I want the cattle rearer. You don't invest, you don't protect the poultry producer. Then it means that that second part of the agricultural sector has been taken for granted. That's why we are saying that for a long time, it is essential to have two separate ministries. Ministry of Agriculture and maybe Ministry of Natural Resources. Well, you can get any name to apply, but a ministry that will bring all these elements, because there is another issue that is also coming up very soon. This deforestation that is taking place at a very rapid level, especially in northern part of the country and moving south, will take unawares. Because now, as you know, every local family has to depend on firewood for its energy to cook food. We hope that very soon government will also contemplate coming out with how to anticipate what is going to happen when a time reaches you cannot get the firewood. Because
we understand, well, I don't know if that is the solution they're coming up with, but only recently I think the federal government was talking about commissioning LPG plants. We hear that NNPC is looking to go into telling companies that they will have to own the cylinders and things of the sort. I mean, there is some plan in terms of using gas, but we don't know how that is going to be implemented. Let's quickly go to Lagos now and take some questions from my colleagues. Chamberlain?
Well, yes, Prof. At some point, the country was told by the former Minister of Agric that some of these herdsmen perpetrating some of these crimes they were coming from outside the country. Many raised questions and concerns about that. And then you've heard the recent comment from the Office of the VP trying to clarify what the real situation is in terms of the role that they are playing. And then some time ago, you heard that, well, they say that, yes, it's true, FG gazetted land in 36 states. Then another communication that, 12 states have applied. So Don't you think all of this miscommunication is fueling the fear and the suspicion, which you alluded to somewhat about the real intention of all of this, coupled with when they say they're going to use state resources to build all of this? So isn't that communication part of the problem, that why people don't understand what really wants to happen?
Well, this question is a very big question. I agree with you totally that this matter has to be looked at holistically, and I will also suggest dispassionately. The issue here is that other countries that have cattle, much more than Nigeria, some of them do not go through what we are going through. For example, without going too much into statistics, Nigeria is not even among the top 10 cattle owners in the world as at 2015 statistics. It's maybe around number 14 or thereabout, with about 20 million cattle. So what is happening here is that, like you said in your question, and like I said at the beginning of my conversation here, is that every public policy, whenever it is new, there is bound to be some sort of resistance, especially when it has been highly politicized and charged. Politicized because the issue of land and water for a long time to come will be some battleground for people, local and international. So it is important, like I said, that in proposing this policy as it is, as an initiative, once the government carries along, all other leaders of the various communities understand not only the negative side which are there, but also the positive side which are there, then I think we'll have a middle ground. You know, the most important thing is that Nigeria is an agrarian society. And I mentioned it to my sister here, that you cannot talk about agriculture without talking about poultry. You cannot talk about forestry, fisheries, and livestock production. Unfortunately, as we are today here, we don't have a systematic, organized commercial production of livestock as it is today. Some of our colleagues and friends and associates that we know here and there who have attempted to go into commercial livestock production as it is, most of them have ended up going into trouble because their own cattle also have been taken away. So,
if I may come in here. My apologies. If I may just come in here just so that I get a good clarification from you on what RUGA means and what the cattle settlements means, or the colonies. I know that RUGA, for instance, has been in existence for as long as the Fulanis have been in existence. And they have a localized place where they keep their herds called the RUGA, not necessarily fenced. But is there a difference, in your view, between what RUGA entails and what a ranch entails?
I think you are right. Traditionally, the Fulani does know that those ones that are the mobile, not the sedentary Fulanis, like some of us who have sat down in the cities and forgotten the bush. This one, they are mobile. They move from point to point. And what they needed are about 3 or 4 things. And the one is the roots, so that when they have roots, they can move as quickly as possible without necessarily going into people's farms. 2, they have some zangos. Usually, if they are foreign cattle owner, when they come into a country, they have people who guide them through. And then if there are any conflicts or any problem, there are the people who also intercede between them and the local communities. And then, like I mentioned, also the issue of water points. And then, of course, if you have forest reserves. But what you have just said is that forest reserves most of them have been decimated. Grazing reserves have been decimated. So maybe the concept of RUGA here is like creating a form of a buffer for people who can stay, because most of them will not even want to stay very long before they move forward. But the most important thing is that there must be cohabitation, or a ground for cohabitation between the cattle owner and then the farmer.
So you think this is a welcome idea?
Absolutely. Like I said, every idea that comes, if it is taken with a lot of sincerity, there's no problem. But if it is interpreted and misinterpreted, then the danger is that it will affect the negative consequence. So I think what is important, if this is not a continuous discussion, so in that case, anybody, group or community that have any fear, some people use very big terms, that they are being colonized. That's a very big term. Like the continuation of Ansofodio invasion and this thing, caliphate. These are big terms. So therefore, it means there is a genuine fear among people. And this genuine fear, unless you clear it, you will not be able to achieve the overall objective.
No, it's a fine. Well, I'm sorry, Prof. We're totally out of time on that regard. As you said, it's a continuing conversation, and it's something that we hope that we will get more clarity on as the conversation goes on. We have to thank you for coming on Sunrise Today this morning. Professor Rufai Alkali is a former National Publicity Secretary of the PDP, former Pro-Chancellor and Chairman of Council of FUT MENA, and also a former Commissioner for Agriculture and Water Resources in Gombe State.